before we start today's show, I want to know, what year did you become a Browns fan? Whether you were born a Browns fan, so whatever year you were born, maybe a favorite player of yours came over from college to Cleveland. But let me know in the comment section below what year you became a Browns fan. The Cleveland Browns just got some great news. And it's not the Amari Cooper news, which is good as well, but what I want to talk about today is what I originally planned on talking about before the Amari Cooper contract news broke on Tuesday, and that was a little NFL news story item that just kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit that I don't think people picked up on. And so we're going to run through this news item with you guys because if you didn't see it, the NFL and the NFLPA had a discussion that became public about moving on to an 18-game schedule. And while that might not seem like it's something that would have a major implication for the Cleveland Browns, it does. And I'm going to tell you why on today's show. So I first want to start by sharing this quote from Lloyd Howell, who is the NFLPA high-up exec. And in an interview with the Washington Post, he said, "We have talked at a very, very, very high level superficially with a recognition about, this is something that we should be talking about. And we should really kick the tires and understand what else goes into that decision-making process." So, as I said, the Washington Post kind of the first one to break the NFLPA side of this story. But adding an 18th game isn't a new idea. It's just something that hasn't been discussed by the player side that much, at least not by the high-up NFLPA reps. However, the executive director saying something definitely shows a good sign of progress going down that path. And I promise I'm going to land this plane as to why all of this pertains to the Cleveland Browns. But like I said, this is not the first time that people have discussed the idea of adding an 18th game. Roger Goodell, just a few months ago, back in May, discussed the idea of an 18-game season publicly. I mean, when you're the NFL commissioner, you pick and choose your spots and your words. So for him to be public about this, I think it says a lot. Or how about Joe Burrow himself when he was on the Part of My Take podcast? Joe Burrow talked about the idea of adding a game 18. You can look at the headline right now on screen for you guys in just a moment. Did Joe Burrow fix football? Bengals QB reveals simple but perfect 18-game NFL scheduling solution. And in Burrow's idea, they would have like an all-star break, like in the NHL and the NBA, where all 32 teams have a bye somewhere around week 12 or week 13. But, again, why does any of this matter to the Browns? Why does adding an 18th game mean a piece of good news for Cleveland? This is why. The simple fact of the matter is when you have a growing enterprise and there are opportunities within that intervening period of time where progress could be made and you could tweak the existing CBA legal document, why wouldn't you do that? I call it bargaining. I call it amendments. I call it updates to what is now a living document called a CBA. Yeah, I want to be able to have our membership in a position to jump on it when we can. Not wait until their playing days are done and it's like you go through the cycle all over again. So why is that good news? Well, because the last time the NFL added an additional game, when they went from 16 to 17, they had to wait until the collective bargaining agreement was up for review, which was back at 2020. Now, the next one's not up until 2030. But the NFLPA executive director is talking about amending the CBA now, not waiting until the end of the agreement back in 2030, which means all of this could point to an 18-game season coming possibly as soon as next year. We've seen how quickly the NFL can work. They added a brand new kickoff rule in one offseason. They make a lot of changes in the offseason. So if the NFL adds an 18-game schedule sooner rather than later, well, more games equals more money. And more money equals a bigger salary cap. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what the Browns are betting on. That is why it is great news for Andrew Berry and this front office. Browns can get a bigger salary cap league-wide, that is going to soften their approach of heavy spending. The big contracts they have been giving out have all been under the assumption that the NFL salary cap will continue to rise. And it will, barring one of two things: a global pandemic or this DirecTV Sunday ticket lawsuit taking a major chunk out of the league revenue. And as a result, the NFL salary cap could either stay the same or just go down or maybe only marginally up. So outside of those two things, the Browns have made a pretty safe bet. As we saw last year, how big, or I guess this year, how big of an increase there was in the NFL salary cap. And if the salary cap continues to go up and exponentially up, all of a sudden the salary cap hits the Browns have for guys like Deshaun Watson, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, David Njoku, their offensive line, the percentage cap hit is going to go down. And that means the Browns are going to have more money to spend on other spots on their roster, and they're not going to have to start cutting or trading guys to get below the salary cap. Now, I'm going to add more onto this in just a second, but I do want to share a quick word from our great friends over at Game Time. Today's show is sponsored by Game Time. If you love summer baseball and want to catch a Guardians game or any other major league team, you're going to want to give Game Time a shot. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. One thing I really like about Game Time is their flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Plus, they offer the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, this next graphic I'm putting on screen is not to scare you, but just to be upfront. This is the Browns salary cap space per over the cap for the next 3 seasons. They are $44 million and change over the salary cap in 2025. In 2026, they're $16 million over the salary cap. By the way, the Browns in 2026, as of this moment, are the only team over the salary cap. And in 2027, like pretty much every other team, a lot of contracts that are currently on their books are likely going to be expired by then. So they've got plenty of salary cap space, but that's also a very long ways away from now. But for the next 2 years, the Browns are in a little bit of a bind when it comes to the salary cap. Now, no, they're not screwed. I know that you're going to see some people on Twitter try and tell you the Browns are doomed. They don't have any salary cap space. No, I'm going to push back on that. Because like we saw just a few months ago, the NFL salary cap jumped up 13.5% in 2024. And if they add an 18th game, well, an 18th game, ladies and gentlemen, means the NFL gets a little bit more money from all their TV partners. Fox, CBS, NBC, Amazon Prime, Netflix. Everyone's getting an NFL game right now. And if the NFL revenue goes up, well, all the teams get more money distributed to them. And as a result, the salary cap is going to go up. And that is why the Browns have been wise in their spending, because they have been making pretty smart bets, in my opinion. The NFL salary cap is going to continue to go up. And sure, while this year Deshaun Watson's salary cap hit looks like it's 20% or whatever number it is, well, in 3 years, that 20% is going to dwarf down to 10 to 15% because of the rise of the NFL salary cap. So I understand why players may not be on board with an 18th game, because it's a lot of wear and tear on their body. An 18th game means, 60, 70 more snaps. That's 60, 70 more plays where someone could get injured. But for the Browns, I'm sure it's what they're pulling for. It's more money, it's more spending, and it's easier on their salary cap burdens. And for the fans, well, if they add an 18th game, that means they're adding not an extra game altogether, because they're just going to remove one preseason game, but they're going to probably add maybe another bye week or just another week altogether. And as a result, we're going to get Super Bowl Sunday the day before President's Day. And we're going to have a 3-day weekend, which we have been chasing for our entire lives. Now, one important note. When the NFL went from 16 to 17 games, you might be wondering, all right, what happened to players' contracts? Like, did they get an extra paycheck? Because if you don't know, the way players get paid is they get a paycheck for every single game they play. Or not play, but they're on their roster for. So when the NFL expanded to 17 games, players received an extra paycheck. However, that extra paycheck did not count towards the team's salary cap. So all contracts that were signed and agreed to before a potential 18-game extension and agreement would not be subject to reworking the contract. They would just get an extra paycheck for the extra game and extra week being played. So if all that sounded confusing to you, which even like halfway through I kind of confused myself because we're talking a lot of legal jargon here and I'm not a lawyer. In short, 18 games equals more revenue, right? An extra regular season game, more TV contracts, more TV money. We all agree. That equals salary cap increase, which equals good for Andrew Berry because he has been spending Jimmy and D Haslam's money like it is burning a hole in his wallet. And if the salary cap goes up, well, the thing that people love to point out about the Browns' shortcomings is they're going to be in salary cap hell soon. They can't pay all these guys. It's going to come back to haunt them. No, it won't. The salary cap continues to rise and rise exponentially more because of an 18-game schedule, which it does sound like that has to wait till 2030. It sounds like that could get done in the near future as the NFLPA executive director said himself. It's a living document. They can amendment. That could be something that gets done in 2025, 2026. And that'd be very big for the Browns. All right. Before we wrap it up here, quick sub-read, because we are at 142 subscribers in the month of July. And I was looking at the YouTube analytics for the Ravens Rundown, which is at 172. We're not losing to the Ravens Rundown in subscribers in back-to-back months. I'm not going to stand for that. I know there are 31 of you watching that have not subscribed that also hate the Ravens. So please, do all of us a big favor and hit that sub button down below. Now, we have some super thanks I want to catch up on here. Ray Bidding with a super thanks. Appreciate you, Ray, as always. Go Brownies, dude. And then Joshua Miller with a super thanks that I forgot to get to last week. Dalvin Tomlinson, underappreciated or overvalued? So we're going to kind of dive into some Dalvin Tomlinson stats and highlights and whatnot. Last year in his first season with the Browns, 28 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 12 QB hits, and 11 stops. Stops is a metric that PFF tracks. Basically what it looks at is, all right, 28 tackles, but where were those tackles? Were they at the line of scrimmage to halt to play for no yards or little advancement? Or was it after they gained 8 yards and it wasn't that incredible of a tackle? So stops is a good metric to, hey, did that defensive tackle make big-time stops near the line of scrimmage so that the offense gets a minimal gain? Or is it after they rush for 5, 6, 7 yards? Dalvin Tomlinson's PFF grades from last year, he ranked 57th out of 130 qualifying interior defensive linemen. So we're looking at a top half interior defensive tackle. Overall grade, 63.3. Run defense was a little bit low, 52.1. Pass rush, 73.2. I'm a little surprised by the run defense grade, and this kind of serves as a good reminder that PFF is a tool, just that. It's a good tool to use, but by no means should you form your entire opinion based on Pro Football Focus. So when you ask, is he underappreciated or overvalued? I mean, you look at the highest paid defensive tackles, 1 through 9, and you can see Dalvin Tomlinson clocking in at 17th for what he's getting paid and where he stands amongst his peers. I don't think that Dalvin Tomlinson is overrated or underappreciated greatly. I think he is, as lame as this is to say, properly appreciated. Like, maybe he is a little bit underappreciated, but overall, I think Dalvin Tomlinson's appreciation level is at a good spot. Remember how bad the Browns' run defense was before he got there? I mean, we're talking one of the worst in the NFL. And then with his impact in his first year, a run defense that shaved off like 35 yards a game. So I think Dalvin Tomlinson is in a good spot when it comes to appreciation, Josh. Appreciate you, though, for the super thanks. Lastly, we do have to get to a really fun little ending to the show, which is some Browns history via Tim Green. So a few months ago, we ran kind of a special, I guess we can call it, during our live show, which was biggest super chat that day. Got to pick a segment for a show. Tim reached out to me and said, hey, I'd love to do some Browns history, and I love history. So I thought this could be a good little wetting of the beak going into training camp. So some Browns history I want to share with you guys that maybe you knew of already but didn't know the full story, or maybe you're like me and a lot of this was before you were even born. So in 2001, we had an iconic Browns game in not a good way. The overturned Quincy Morgan catch in immediate chaos. So if you don't remember this game, it was coming down to the last few minutes here, and Quincy Morgan came up with a big grab. He was hit immediately, and he may or may not have really completed the process of the catch, but the Browns rushed to the line of scrimmage, and Tim Couch spiked the football. However, Terry McAulay afterwards, after the spike, initiated a review and removed the catch, which sent Browns players, coaches, and fans into an absolute tizzy. Bottles were being thrown from fans down to people sitting in the lower levels and onto the field. Ultimately, the refs called it with 48 seconds still on the clock, but Commissioner Paul Tagliabue made them return to finish the game. All right, moving on here. 1978, Clay Matthews and Ozzie Newsome were selected in round 1 of the NFL draft by the Cleveland Browns. Now, Ozzie Newsome, an NFL Hall of Famer, has his gold jacket. Clay Matthews has yet to get into Canton, but I do think he has a chance of getting in. And if he were to get in, these two players would join Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers as the only two players drafted in round 1 by the same team to make it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Next, 1970. We get the first Monday Night Football game between the Browns and the Jets, a game that Cleveland would win 31-21. Now, fun fact, local viewers in Cleveland actually could not watch the game due to blackout laws, but a few years later, they would amend those laws and changes, and fans were allowed to watch the game if all the tickets were sold within 72 hours before kickoff. 1966, this one's not very nice. Jim Brown, star running back for the Cleveland Browns at the time, and a Browns legend who we unfortunately lost not long ago. He retires over a movie. So here's the story. Jim Brown was deciding, you know what, there is more to life than football, and he noticed that and started to kind of pick up an acting career. He was doing some Western films in the offseason. Now, keep in mind, in 1966, the NFL was not what it was today. A lot of players had off-season jobs. Being an NFL football player did not mean you were a multimillionaire like a lot of guys are today. So Jim Brown was just trying to keep the revenue coming in during the offseason. However, the villain owner, Art Modell, threatened to fine Jim Brown $1,000 a week that he would miss training camp. And Jim Brown, who was looking to wrap up a movie that was bleeding into training camp, said, you know what? How about this? I'll just retire. And that's what he did. So thank you, Art Modell. Not really. And finally, from 1937 to 1954, there were no such thing as the Cleveland Browns. There were the Cleveland Rams, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of. They moved to L.A. right after winning the NFL championship, which that might not be new information to anyone, but I do think what you guys might find interesting is L.A. has been like a foster care for a lot of teams, not just Cleveland. St. Louis moved to L.A. after moving from L.A. Oakland moved to L.A. and then back to Oakland. San Diego Chargers moved to L.A. And I also learned that the Seattle Seahawks were beginning to move to L.A., but it was halted by Commissioner Pete Rozelle as the Browns were going to Baltimore around the same time. The Houston Oilers were going to Nashville, and the NFL had put a rule in that if anyone wants to move to L.A., they have to get league approval. The Seahawks just went under the mindset of better to ask for forgiveness, not permission. And Pete Rozelle began fining Seattle $500,000 for every day they were in Anaheim. So they quickly packed up their stuff and went back to the Pacific Northwest. All right, we're going to bring on Trizzy Trace for the end of today's video. I'm sorry, it's a little bit longer than maybe I planned for. Trace, which card do you want to go with?
I'm liking the 4 of spades.
All right, I'm going to go with the 2 of clubs. You were closer. 5 of diamonds. 5 of diamonds. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our episode today. If you did, go ahead, hit that thumbs up button down below.